husband committed suicide 3 years into the marriage. I've been sitting next to her for 2 hours, and I have to ask, how did he last that long?
You're gonna go against my husband taking his life. Let's talk about mental health and mental illness and things like that. But I thought it was odd. Why are you shooting at the big dog? But as they say, you shoot at the king and you miss. Well, they shot at the queen and they missed, and I lit them up.
They're doing it.
You feel like Tony Hinchcliffe went too far when he made that joke about George Floyd?
It's Tony Hinchcliffe.
Yeah.
I don't expect less. I don't expect more.
I was doing sketches that were funny, but socially irresponsible.
Listen up, y'all, because what just went down at that Kevin Hart roast wasn't just some comedy show gone a little too far. This was a full-scale humiliation ritual playing out right in front of our eyes. And now word on the street is that Dave Chappelle is absolutely livid with Kevin for giving his stamp of approval to some of those white comedians who crossed some serious lines up on that stage. And here's the thing, it's not even primarily about that George Floyd joke, as shocking as that was, because according to sources who are close to the situation and have Dave's ear, the real catalyst for his anger, the thing that's got him truly heated and ready to publicly call Kevin out, is actually what went down with Sheryl Underwood during that roast. So buckle up, because I'm about to walk you through exactly what transpired at this event and why it's causing such massive waves throughout the comedy community right now. Kevin Hart is currently drowning in backlash and criticism from all corners of the internet and the entertainment world for permitting some genuinely disturbing and wildly inappropriate jokes to not only be told, but to air unchallenged during his Netflix roast special. And we're talking about Tony Hinchcliffe going straight for Sheryl Underwood's throat by making a joke, and I use that term loosely, about her late husband, who tragically took his own life all the way back in 1990 after he had been suffering from severe depression, which is already an incredibly sensitive and painful subject that most people with even a shred of decency would know to avoid entirely, especially in a public forum like this.
No, hold up, let me talk. Her husband committed suicide 3 years into the marriage. I've been sitting next to her for 2 hours, and I have to ask, how did he last that long?
Then Hinchcliffe followed that up by throwing out a George Floyd joke into the mix, and here's where it gets even more disturbing. Kevin Hart, sitting right there as both host and producer, thought this material was absolutely hilarious and was cracking up laughing at it.
You've done good, though, Kevin. The black community is so proud of you. Right now, George Floyd is looking up at us all, laughing so hard that he can't breathe. God bless you, Kevin.
Shane Gillis also got in on the action by delivering a lynching joke, and once again, Kevin was right there eating it up, laughing along like it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard in his life. They're all going to be standing up here tonight saying a whole bunch of terrible, awful, and deeply offensive things, and apparently that's just supposed to be entertainment.
But, yeah, you guys like that? But not me. I'm not going to be doing that. I've got a nice PG short joke that I'd like you guys to be a part of, okay? Kevin is so short. Kevin's so short that they're going to have to lynch him from a bonsai tree.
Now let's talk about Sheryl Underwood for a moment, and how she's handled this whole situation with far more grace and dignity than most people would have been able to muster under similar circumstances. She sat down with E.T. and made it clear that she personally didn't take offense to what was said about her, but at the same time she didn't hold back from pointing out that it was genuinely strange and somewhat puzzling that Tony Hinchcliffe, out of all the possible material he could have gone with, chose to make that particular joke about such a deeply personal tragedy in her life.
You're gonna go against my husband taking his life. Let's talk about mental health and mental illness and things like that. But I thought it was odd. Why are you shooting at the big dog? But as they say, you shoot at the king and you miss. Well, they shot at the queen and they missed, and I lit them up.
But here's where the real controversy lies, and why people are so furious. The intense criticism and heat isn't actually landing on Tony Hinchcliffe or Shane Gillis nearly as much as it's landing squarely on Kevin Hart's shoulders, because people across social media and in the entertainment industry are branding him a sellout and a traitor to his own community. And their reasoning is pretty straightforward. Kevin was not just the headliner of this roast, he was also a producer of the entire event, which means he had creative control and final say over what content made it to air. And the fundamental argument being made is that he deliberately allowed jokes that directly mocked and made light of two of the most devastating, traumatic, and painful chapters in Black American history to be broadcast on his watch, under his supervision, and on his platform with his name attached to it. And honestly, What makes this whole situation even more frustrating and harder to defend is that those jokes weren't even remotely funny. They didn't have clever wordplay, they didn't have unexpected twists, they didn't have any of the hallmarks of actual skilled comedy. Because listen, if you're going to venture into the territory of dark humor, that's one thing, and plenty of great comedians have done it successfully, but you absolutely still have to be funny, and there has to be actual craft involved. Because just standing on stage saying deliberately shocking and offensive things purely for shock value, without any real comedic structure or punchline, isn't comedy, it's just being an edgelord for attention. By the way, this is important context. Before the roast even took place and went into production, Michael Che made the decision to pull out of participating in the event entirely, and he later came forward and revealed to the public that when he sat in on the writing room sessions for the roast, he looked around and noticed that the room was predominantly filled with white male writers. And this is crucial because, again, this was Kevin Hart's production. This was his show. He had control over who was in those rooms and what direction the comedy was going to take.
It wasn't a tasteful joke to our culture, to our audience, but our audience that's watching the roast, if you're watching the roast, you get why they're doing it. You get why the racial humor is on the table. Like, it's not, I wasn't shocked. Tony told a joke. It wasn't a tasteful joke to us. We didn't like it. Okay. Hey, man, that joke. We move on. I don't understand why we stand on it.
But then Kevin somehow managed to make this entire controversy even worse than it already was when he appeared as a guest on The Breakfast Club and spent a significant portion of that interview actively defending Tony Hinchcliffe and the jokes that were told, acting like people were overreacting and being too sensitive about the whole thing. And it's George Floyd's death we're talking about here, an execution that the entire world watched and that sparked global protests.
I don't get affected by the attempt of humor. I get it, right? In this case, like, do more. It's my production. That's a different conversation. It's nothing I can do. It's a production. It's a live production. I'm not compromising the live production for a reaction of what? What do you want me to do? I'm supposed to drag him off? You want me to fight afterwards? You want me to turn it into what? That's not what I agreed to do. That's not the job at hand.
And then on top of that, Kevin also proceeded to contradict himself multiple times throughout this same interview in ways that were pretty glaring and obvious to anyone paying attention. Because at one point in the conversation, he's sitting there bragging and talking with pride about how it's our production, emphasizing that he was in charge of every aspect of the show and had his hands all over it, and then literally seconds later in the same breath, he's flipping the script and acting like his hands were completely tied and there was nothing he could have done to prevent those jokes from making it into the final cut, like he was some powerless bystander instead of the actual producer.
I'm a little upset because I know who I am. I know I don't have a homophobic bone in my body. I know that I've addressed it. I know that I've apologized. I don't want to step on that stage and make that night about me and my past.
By the way, let's take a trip down memory lane for a second, because remember when they accused Kevin Hart of being homophobic after his old tweets from years ago resurfaced and started circulating all over social media? This entire controversy erupted in 2019, right around the time that Kevin had just been announced as the host of the Oscars, which is one of the biggest hosting gigs you can possibly get in entertainment. And what did Kevin do when that happened? He immediately issued an apology and stepped down from hosting the Oscars within like a day. But that wasn't enough to satisfy his critics, so he then proceeded to go on every single talk show you can possibly think of, Ellen, Good Morning America, you name it, apologizing over and over again. And I mean, he was practically on his knees in front of the cameras, begging the LGBTQ community to forgive him for those old tweets, and promising he'd grown and changed as a person.
I was doing sketches that were funny, but socially irresponsible. Like, there's this one sketch we did that was about this pixie that would appear whenever things happen. Whenever someone make you feel like they calling you that N-word, but don't say it. But the pixie was in blackface because this was going to be the visual personification of the N-word. But what I didn't consider is the way people use television is subjective. So then when I'm on the set and we're finally taping a sketch, somebody on the set that was white laughed in such a way, and was the first time I'd ever gotten a laugh that I was uncomfortable with.
So let me get this straight. Those tweets from years ago were considered completely unacceptable and required this massive apology tour where Kevin had to humble himself repeatedly and beg for forgiveness from the community he offended. But George Floyd jokes and jokes about actual executions and lynchings? Apparently those are totally fine in Kevin's book, no big deal, just comedy, and we should all just move on and stop making it into this huge thing and stop being so sensitive about it. And yes, I know he didn't personally tell those jokes himself with his own mouth, but it was his roast, it was his show. He literally produced the entire thing from start to finish, which means he approved that content and gave it the green light to go out to millions of viewers.
5-year period, every single movie that Kevin Hart did was a movie that had been on my desk, that all I had said was, just, can we take some of this step and fetch it out? And then I can do it. Like, it don't need to be overtly homosexual, because I'm not homosexual, right? It doesn't need that to be funny, right? And me saying that and them going, oh yeah, no problem. And then going to give it to this other guy and having him do it just like it was. And acting like I'm a bad person because I keep standing on my standard. But, yeah, it's interesting, but I wouldn't change it for the world. It was for a while. And when we use them for a while until somebody says that ain't a good word, we should stop saying that. Correct. That don't make people feel good. And we stop saying the word. And we move on to another word. You can't say the R word. You can certainly say special needs. Yeah. You can certainly say spectrum. Be slow. There are things that you can say to get your point that don't have to hurt people. Right. But you would know that if what you did was construct the English language for a living, then you would understand that part. Kevin told you he wasn't gonna wear no dress until they offered him the dress, and then he put it on. And what did he say after he wore it? I made my own decision. Duh. But you didn't make it before they brought it up, did you?
Now, several prominent black comedians are going after Kevin and calling him out publicly for this. And Dave Chappelle is leading the charge on this front, which makes sense when you understand Dave's history with the industry. Dave literally escaped to Africa to physically get away from his handlers and the people who were trying to control his career and his creative output. And when he finally returned to the United States after that extended time away, he went on the Oprah Winfrey Show and sat down for a serious, in-depth conversation where he revealed that his bosses at Comedy Central had been pressuring him and actively wanted him to do what he described as socially irresponsible jokes. And what he meant by that was exactly these kinds of jokes. Jokes that perpetuate stereotypes. Jokes that punch down at vulnerable communities. Jokes that make white audiences feel comfortable laughing at black people instead of with them. And Dave quickly realized during his time on that show that even though those jokes were technically funny from a pure comedy mechanics standpoint, the white audience members in the crowd weren't laughing with him like he had initially thought. They were laughing at him. They were laughing at the stereotypes and the caricatures he was portraying. And that realization made him deeply uncomfortable and was a major factor in his decision to walk away.
Tony, you think you hurt my feelings by talking about my dead husband? My husband only died once. You die every night with them whack-ass jokes you be telling. Shane, you may talk about me, but I know your kind. You want to hit this black harder than you hit the windows of the Capitol on January 6th.
So here's the critical difference that needs to be understood between these two situations and these two men's choices. Dave Chappelle got offered an enormous bag of money, we're talking tens of millions of dollars, to perform racial stereotypes for a predominantly white audience that would be laughing at him rather than with him. And he looked at that offer, thought long and hard about what it would mean for his integrity and his soul, and ultimately said, no, I'm not doing that. I'm walking away even if it costs me everything. Kevin Hart, on the other hand, produced an entire televised show where that exact same dynamic, white comedians making jokes about black trauma for a mixed audience that includes plenty of white people laughing at those jokes, played out in real time, and not only did he go along with it, he defended it afterwards and laughed along during the actual event. Now there's honestly a lot that could be said about Dave Chappelle in the present day and where he stands now compared to where he stood back then, because some people would even argue that he's no better than Kevin Hart these days when you look at some of his more recent decisions and the crowds he's been performing for. Remember that whole Riyadh Comedy Festival situation where he performed in Saudi Arabia for a massive payday despite that country's human rights record? Honestly, it doesn't feel like this is the same man who turned down $50 million and then sat across from Oprah, exposing exactly how the industry really works behind the scenes and what kinds of compromises they ask you to make, but that's probably a topic that deserves its own dedicated video. I want to bring the focus back to Kevin Hart specifically because it's not just Dave Chappelle who tried to warn us about him and what he represents. A lot of people are now also bringing up and recirculating what Cat Williams said about Kevin during that legendary Club Shay Shay interview that went viral. Remember that appearance? Cat called Kevin an industry plant in very explicit terms, and claimed that he was specifically handpicked by the higher-ups and the gatekeepers who control Hollywood because he was willing to do whatever they asked of him, no matter what it was or how it might affect his community. So here's what Cat Williams was really getting at with those comments, and it's deeper than just surface-level beef between comedians. It wasn't just a random feud, or some jealous comedian taking shots because Kevin is more successful. His argument was much more substantive than that. His point was that Kevin got to the very top of the entertainment industry for a very specific and calculated reason. And it's not just because he's funny, though he clearly has comedic talent, and it's not just because he worked hard, though he certainly put in work throughout his career. It's because his whole mentality, his whole approach to the industry, his willingness to go along with whatever the powers that be want from him, is exactly what the industry gatekeepers are actively looking for when they decide who to elevate to superstardom. They don't elevate people who make them uncomfortable. They don't elevate people who challenge the system. They don't elevate people who might use their platform to speak truth to power or advocate for their communities in ways that threaten the status quo. They elevate people who will stay in line. Think about it for a moment and really let this sink in. Jokes about historical black trauma, jokes about George Floyd's murder, jokes about lynchings, all of that is apparently fair game in Kevin's world and on his platform. But here's the question that nobody in mainstream media wants to ask. Would Kevin go along with it if someone on that roast stage made a similar joke about the historical trauma of another particular group of people? You know exactly what I'm talking about. I don't even need to spell it out. If we're going to be edgy and push boundaries and say nothing is off limits, then nothing should be off limits, right? But clearly, obviously, undeniably, some things are still very much off limits in Hollywood and in entertainment, and Kevin Hart knows that better than anyone. He understands exactly where those lines are and would never dream of crossing them. That's precisely why they elevated him to the position he's in. That's why he gets Netflix specials and major movie roles and hosting gigs. They find the ones who will take the check without asking too many questions, smile for the cameras, stay in line, play the game, and never would bite the hand that feeds them, no matter what they're asked to do. And Kevin Hart, whether he fully realizes it or not, or whether he's just chosen to make peace with it, fits that mold absolutely perfectly. When the Oscars homophobia controversy happened and threatened his career and his reputation, he apologized in less than 24 hours, before anyone even had time to organize a proper boycott or campaign against him, and then he proceeded to go on every talk show with a platform to talk at length about how much he loves and respects the queer community, and how much he's learned and grown. And you know what happened? Kevin was forgiven. The controversy died down. He did exactly what they told him to do, and he proved his obedience to the system. Now contrast that response with someone like Dave Chappelle walking away from $50 million because he didn't like what they were asking him to do with his platform. That's the complete opposite energy. That's showing the higher-ups and gatekeepers that you can't be controlled, that you can't be bought, that there's a price you won't pay for success. And what happened to Dave after he did that? They called him crazy. They questioned his mental health. They smeared his name in the media. They tried to destroy his reputation and make him a cautionary tale for anyone else who might think about walking away from the industry's money and influence. And yeah, it's true that Dave has changed a lot since those days and has made compromises of his own in recent years, but that doesn't change the fundamental point here. This just proves Cat Williams' entire argument about how the system operates. The system isn't broken. It's not malfunctioning. It's not accidentally elevating the wrong people. It's working exactly how they designed it to work. It's functioning precisely as intended, elevating the people who will serve their interests and marginalizing the ones who won't. So that roast we all watched wasn't some accident or slip-up where things went a little too far by mistake. It wasn't Kevin being blindsided by rogue comedians going off script. It wasn't a situation where he lost control of his own show. Kevin knows exactly what he's doing. He knows exactly what he signed up for. He knows who signs his checks and what they expect from him in return for the fame and wealth and opportunities they've given him. But I want to circle back one more time to Sheryl Underwood, because honestly, this is what matters the most in this whole situation and what gives me hope. Sheryl walked into Kevin Hart's roast, fully aware and knowing she was about to get dragged through the mud, knowing she was about to be the target of brutal jokes from multiple comedians, and baby, let me tell you, she absolutely flipped the script in the most powerful way possible. After those white comedians made absolutely brutal and deeply personal jokes about her late husband's suicide, she got up on that stage herself and delivered the only set of the entire night that had everyone in that room on their feet, giving her a standing ovation, showing real respect, recognizing actual talent and class when they saw it. They really came for Sheryl Underwood, thinking she was going to be an easy target, thinking they could break her down and humiliate her, and she'd just take it. But she reminded everybody in that room and everybody watching at home exactly why she's been in this game for decades, why she's survived and thrived in an industry that chews people up and spits them out, and why you should never underestimate someone with her level of skill, experience, and sheer resilience. But now I want to hear your takes on all of this, because this is a conversation that needs to keep happening, mainly how you personally feel about Kevin Hart defending all those jokes and standing by that content even after all the backlash. Are you one of those people who genuinely think it's not that deep, and everyone's just being too sensitive, and we should all lighten up because it's just comedy? Or did this roast and Kevin's response to the criticism confirm once again, beyond any shadow of a doubt, exactly how the entertainment industry works behind the scenes, who really holds the power, and who pulls the strings that make these puppets dance? Drop all your thoughts and comments below because I genuinely want to know where you stand on this, and make sure you stay tuned for the next video where we'll dive even deeper into these issues.